Hello, and welcome to Why Do We Do That? A psychology podcast that deconstructs human behavior from the perspectives of social scientists, psychologists, and others that use applied psychology in their work. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Moyer. In this episode, I sat down with behavioral scientist and motivation expert, Dr. Ayelet Fishbach. Ayelet is the Jeffrey Breckenridge Keller Professor of Behavioral Science and Marketing at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. She is the past president of the Society for the Science of Motivation and the International Social Cognition Network. Ayelet's groundbreaking research on human motivation has won the Society of Experimental Social Psychology's Best Dissertation Award, the Society of Consumer Psychology's Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award, and the Fulbright Educational Foundation Award. She is the author of Get It Done: Surprising Lessons from the Science of Motivation, which was the focus of our conversation. One key takeaway I had from our discussion was the importance of liking the process of pursuing goals that are important to us. While discipline will always be a key ingredient in goal pursuit, we must take pleasure in the journey in order for our perseverance to be sustainable. Unfortunately, considering how to make goal pursuit fun requires a lot of effort, so many of us overlook this part of the process. I was also startled at how important our mindset can be when maintaining motivation over time. Simple tweaks to how we think about and plan our goals can increase the likelihood of achieving them in the long run. In a few short weeks, we will welcome in the new year. And if you are planning on making some big changes or simply small ones in the form of New Year's resolutions, the motivational principles we discuss will be invaluable to you as you embark on your journey of change. Enjoy. Okay, I am joined today by Ayelet Fishbach. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Happy to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about motivation and Ayelet's book, Get It Done: Surprising Lessons from the Science of Motivation. I have to say right off the bat that I really enjoyed the book. I particularly am fond of books that cram as much nuance as possible into behavioral science, and so I really liked the amount of detail in the book. That was probably my favorite part. A lot of surprise, and again, surprising lessons. A lot of surprising lessons, especially in the nuance of how people think about motivation and goals. So,
Thank you.
So to start, you can't really think about motivation unless you talk about goal pursuit. These kind of ideas are kind of woven together. But before we get into what makes a good goal and how do we stay on track with our goals, I would like you to make the case for long-term goal pursuit. So it seems to me as though some people avoid thinking about long-term goals for one reason or another. So perhaps they're too busy. Perhaps they're just generally on autopilot. Maybe some of them even spin their lack of interest in long-term goals as, I like to live in the moment. And I don't, perhaps they avoid long-term goals because they don't have to worry about failure, right? If you set up a long-term goal, it's something you can fail at. Whereas if you're always kind of winging it, you don't have to track progress and stuff like that. So to those individuals, what is the case for building your life around pursuing long-term goals?
Well, you just made the argument for why you should not have long-term goals because they might not work out as you plan. I would like to add to it that as a species, we were not designed to think long-term. Okay? Like we were not supposed to save for retirement, because if you think about like our development as people, there were no banks, okay? And if you put food aside, it will get spoiled. Okay? And so you should not be thinking 20 years ahead. It doesn't mean anything. Okay? You should worry about tomorrow, but not next year or 5 years from now. And so it might not be natural for many people. You might want to live in the moment. However, on the other side, we live in a modern world in which you really don't have a choice. You really need to be thinking about your finances ahead of time. You should be thinking about your career, if you want to have a career, right? You cannot just live in a moment. You should think about your health if you want to have long lives. Okay? You should think about your relationship if you don't want to lose your temper and destroy it the moment it doesn't feel good. And so in our modern world, you do need to think long term, and luckily for you and me and everybody who listens, it doesn't need to be a chore. It doesn't need to be something unpleasant. So live in the moment, have fun, but you also need to have some goals.
Yeah, and so the book goes into great detail about pursuing goals. At the beginning of this process, you emphasize that it's kind of important to frame the goal properly, that there are things that we need to consider when we're sort of deciding what to aim at. So what are some of these considerations that we need to take in mind when we're planning how to achieve a goal?
Yes, in a way, I start my book with your argument that some goals are not going to be good for you. Okay, I tell the story of a group of people trying to make it to the top of Mount Everest on a bad weather day, not quite making it back to safety. And so some goals are not going to be good for us. They are not right for the person that I am, okay, for my abilities, for my health, and so on. And I think that many of us were at one point in our life pursuing the wrong goal. How to set a goal that is right for you? Well, think about this goal as something that you desire, not as a chore, not as a means, okay? Something that will fulfill your life with meaning, with enthusiasm. Ask yourself why. Okay? Get a little bit more abstract in your thinking. Why do I want to pursue this career? Why do I want to exercise more? Why do I want to start a relationship? So you get an idea of why this is exciting. Okay? And then also ask how, so it is clear what's the path to get there. And ideally, this path is pleasant and something that you can see yourself doing. Have the right incentives. Approach goals work better than avoidance goals. So think about what you want to do more than what you do not want to do. Numbers can be useful. And I can keep going, but if we want to start with one thing, then it should be a goal, not a means, not a chore.
Yes, and I've seen there's sort of this message that is that I come across with respect to this line of research, which is it's much better to make a goal fun and interesting than it is to remind yourself how important it is. That it must be attractive in some way, shape, or form. It has to be something that has value to you. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and let me actually give you an example from studies. One is a study in which we had students here at the University of Chicago, bidding on a book. That was one group of students, another group of students that was bidding on a tote bag. And we found that the people who were bidding on the tote bag were willing to pay only $11, while those bidding on the book were willing to pay about $23 on average. Now, the catch was that the tote bag contained the book, and the people that were bidding on the tote bag knew it. Okay, and so now think about it. Why would you be willing to pay less for a tote bag that contains a book than for the book? Now, obviously, these are like different people. They don't know about the other group, but still, it kinds of show that we don't like to work, and in this case, like invest our money in something that is not the goal itself, okay? That is a carrying device, okay? We don't like to pay for shipping or parking or gift wrapping, or in this experiment, a tote bag, okay? We want to work on the thing itself. Now, another study is a study in which we went to people who were pursuing all kinds of goals, and we were looking like at people studying, and we asked them about their study materials, and we interviewed people about the food that they eat. We were interested in gym users, like how much they exercise. And in all these different groups, we asked people how important it is for you to do what you do, and how much you enjoy it. Okay, how much it brings pleasure. Okay, so I mentioned my last group was the people at the gym. So now, how much you enjoy this exercise, and how important it is for you that you go to the gym. Consistently for students studying in the library, for people who were choosing their food, for those in the gym, how important the goal was did not predict how much they were doing. What predicted how much they were doing was how much they enjoyed, okay? How much it was pleasurable to pursue the goal. Now think about it. These are not goals that people usually pursue for the sake of enjoying it, okay? I don't know about you, but I don't go to the gym because I cannot think of something more pleasurable to do. Staying in bed, I would enjoy that more. Okay? When students go to the library, I'm sure they can think of something that they would prefer doing over being there, at least most of them. But the extent to which people were excited about doing the work, to the extent to which they were intrinsically motivated, predicted persistence. And these are just like two illustrations for why it is so important when you pursue a goal to plan to enjoy it and be excited about it and find meaning in it. Otherwise, no matter how important it is, it will be hard to stick with it.
So I'll ask you a question that I've asked a lot of other people related to in conversation around this topic. When I hear something like that enjoying the activity is a much stronger predictor than seeing that activity is important, I might try to spin that as, well, it sounds to me like you're saying that I shouldn't be going to the gym because I'm not the type of person that likes going to the gym. Now, of course, you're not necessarily saying that per se, but sometimes when I think about motivation, I look around and I see, I don't want to necessarily do strength training every day. Is it the case that I need to harness intrinsic motivation, so this to figure out a way to layer on something that makes it enjoyable rather than just avoid things that I'm not interested in?
Thanks for raising this, Ryan. It is very critical that people don't take this advice of you should enjoy what you're doing to suggest that you should only do things that feel good at the moment. Okay? That the advice of motivation scientists, which is what I am, is not to spend all your money and eat everything that sweet and oily and bad for you, and just do whatever feels good the moment it feels good. Not at all. Okay? But when pursuing your long-term goals, and we started our discussion with that, you need to find a path that feels good at the moment. And it might not feel good the first time you try. Okay, so you mentioned weight training. Okay, you might do it for the first time and it will feel not right. Okay? And it will take, 7, 10 times for this to start feeling like something that you enjoy doing. Okay, that you get some value from doing it, that the way there feels right. However, if at no point you can see yourself enjoying this, if the sole purpose of doing it is that you're trying to achieve something that will only occur after you did the work, well, the data is that you're not going to stick with it. That is, if you hate running, you are not going to run. And it doesn't matter that it's really important to move your body. You have to find something else. You have to lift weights or do aerobic or I think swim. Find something else. Okay, running is just not going to happen for you. But you're absolutely right that you need to find that the thing that you might learn to like, condition on that serves the goal.
Yeah, it reminds me of the word sort of sustainable. What is sustainable? So you can, plan to start exercising or moving more, but if it's like, yeah, as to your point, like if you're miserable, you'll do it for a short period of time. It just won't be sustainable. Same thing with losing weight via dieting. Anyone can do something with discipline for a month. The question is, do you want to do something for a month and lose 20 pounds, or do you want to change the way that you eat? If you want to change the way that you eat, that's when you need to mix in a healthy dose of that inherent motivation.
Yes, and the data is pretty clear that people who eat healthy food are people who are able to design the healthy diet that they enjoy. The main predictor of food consumption is taste. We eat food that we like. So given that we want to eat healthy food, we basically have two options. Okay? One, we can identify the healthy food that we already like. And the second is that we need to teach ourselves to like new foods that are good for us. And, luckily, we don't actually need to choose. We can do both.
Mm-hmm. Now, another interesting development in motivation science is this idea that action should come before motivation, not the other way around. So classically, people think of, well, I like drawing, but I'm not in the mood to draw right now. I'll draw when I'm in the mood to draw. And it seems as though we should be thinking of it the exact opposite, that I will draw and then I will feel better. I will be in a better mood. Could you elaborate more on this idea?
Yes, I would say that it goes both ways. Okay, often we do something because we thought that might be a good idea for us, but as you just mentioned, many times the liking is the consequence of doing. Okay, and starting with early research by Festinger on cognitive dissonance and BAM on social self-perception, we found as a field that when people do something, they learn to incorporate that as part of who they are and as part of what they like doing. So, first do it, and then your attitudes will follow up. In more recent studies that we ran, we found that even telling people do something, knowing that you are not going to feel good about it, okay, made them more willing to engage after the initial engagement. And just to be more specific here, we ran studies with the Second City Improvisation Club here in Chicago, and the Second City has a training center where people like me and you go there to learn improvisation. And I must say, I was a student there. It's a very uncomfortable experience initially. And so in our study, Caitlin, Woolley, and I invited people to feel uncomfortable as they run through their exercises. They were all beginners, okay? So they're all starting, and your goal is to feel uncomfortable. And people do that knowing that they should feel uncomfortable. They do feel uncomfortable. They tell us, but you know what? They want to do it again. Okay, they want to engage. They feel more comfortable about being initially uncomfortable. So do it, feel uncomfortable. It will become comfortable later.
I will insert a plug. So I did talk to Caitlin Woolley about consumer motivation, which is an earlier episode of this podcast. If you're listening, go check that out. I highly recommend that episode. Sticking on this discomfort for a moment in terms of it being sort of this motivator or something that can lead to better outcomes. I want you to talk a little bit about framing, because I pitched the cold plunge, the cold shower type thing to a lot of people as sort of a way to psychologically, voluntarily put yourself in a state of discomfort so that you can, in future cases that you might encounter, you're going to move forward towards that goal. And the cold shower is sort of a microcosm of that process. I've been trying to pitch this to many people. Oftentimes it's a hard no, right? Hard no. I don't want to be cold. That sounds terrible. Since your book focuses on framing, on thinking of a goal as A versus B, is there something we can do in a social context to reframe discomfort, to reframe these challenges, and be a little bit more persuasive when it comes to convincing people to move towards discomfort?
It's possible that the discomfort that you recommended was a bit too extreme. Okay, I don't take cold showers ever. Okay, that sounds like that this is beyond my level of comfort. But I do try new foods that I suspect I might not initially find exciting. Okay, I think that many people would say I'm willing to eat food that I will call interesting. This is an interesting way to make a salad. We had people reading news that is often uncomfortable. Okay? So reading about whether it's gun violence or learning about the political views of people that you disagree with. Maybe for some people this is like taking a cold shower, but for many people, this is the kind of level of discomfort that I'm willing to embrace, with the hope that once I do this, I will learn to like it. Now, don't get me wrong. If you are going to change yourself, if you're going to stick to some goal, you have to have pleasure, immediate pleasure from doing it. Like, it has to feel right. Okay? And so when we talk about initially feeling discomfort, it's really about the initial engagement. Okay? I might not like getting myself out of bed early in the morning, but I will enjoy the workout. Okay, I will get benefits from this that will not only materialize after I'm done. These are the things that people find extremely hard to persist on, when the benefit only happens after, when it's not part of doing the thing.
Right. In your book, you talk about this idea that when we pursue sort of long-term goals, that our motivation, it often doesn't fluctuate linearly, that rather we tend to be highly motivated in the beginning because we're starting something, and then we're motivated at the end because we can see the finish line, and then there's this quote unquote middle problem. Very broadly, can you talk about what we need to know about where our progress is in the journey and how that should change the way we continue to strive forward towards our goals?
Exactly as you described, motivation is high when we start something to the extent that it has a clear end. Right? My last class toward an academic degree, it's my last purchase before getting some reward in a consumer marketing program. Then motivation will pick up again. Okay? In the middle, you will see less motivation. We are talking now around the time of the Hanukkah holiday, and in one of the studies that we did that was led by Rima Tillery, we asked people who observed the holiday whether they were lighting the candles on the 8th night of Hanukkah. And basically, if you observe the holiday, you need to light the candles on 8 nights. Most people admitted to only light the candles on the first and the last night. That means in the middle, they had a middle problem. They were not quite doing what they were hoping to do. So we need middles to be short. We need to set a monthly exercise goal or a weekly exercise goal. We need to set an annual saving for retirement goal, even though we will work on this goal until we retire. We need short-term goals that have less of a middle. You mentioned framing, and this is a good place where we can really choose how to frame the goal. Are we thinking about our annual, monthly, weekly, daily goal? These are just simple ways of framing a goal in a way that works best for you.
So it's the what your advice is, if what I'm hearing is correct, is that we should manufacture our goals to have these benchmarks, because if we don't, we'll get lost in this middle problem. So instead of creating goals that are too long, like let's say at a 3-month scale, we take that 3-month goal and we break it up into smaller pieces so that we can have the psychological reward of completion at each step.
And there is less of a middle to this goal.
Right.
Okay, it's a goal where there is much more on the beginning and the end than in the middle.
Now, another thing that you talk about in the book is incentives. Incentives as being a way to create a motivation to do something that maybe you don't want to do. There's, you talk about some very classic studies in psychology that shows that incentives can undermine motivation if you like the activity to begin with. So, for example, with children that like to draw, if you give them a reward for drawing when they already like drawing, they start to associate their drawing with the reward and not the activity itself. And so essentially it interferes with your internal motivation to do that activity, and to the point where people lose interest in the activity. I've given this example to my students, and some of them shared that they were one of them in particular had a job drawing for a company, and lost his taste for drawing because he started to get paid to do it. Same thing with music. Somebody, when they're paid to do the music or they're paid to do the art, it interferes with their inherent motivation. So if incentives or rewards can undermine our internal motivation, what's the context for when we should be using incentives? How do we use incentives in a good way, correctly?
Well, so sometimes incentives undermine our motivation. More often they actually change our motivation. So we are now pursuing the incentive. Okay, so if you're going to reward yourself for walking a certain number of steps a day, you might be spending a lot of time walking, but not biking or swimming or doing anything that is not about counting steps. Okay, and so you might actually neglect the important aspects of working out and of developing your body because you're only focused on what is being incentivized. I talk in my writing about the example of Wells Fargo, the bank that rewarded employees for opening a large number of accounts for the customers. Okay, now that employees were very motivated to open many accounts for the clients of the bank. But the problem was that they were less motivated to do it within what we would consider ethical or actually even legal. Okay, and so many of these accounts were accounts that clients were unaware of and had no need for. So incentives can change behavior, except it might not be in the right direction. And other times, incentives might make you doubt why you were doing something in the first place. And in one of our studies, we incentivized children to eat healthy food, and they said that the food doesn't taste very good. Okay, and so basically they were thinking, why are there incentives for eating this food? I guess I don't actually like carrots, so these crackers that we were offering. This is a problem, but incentives can be used for our benefit, and so identify the behavior that you do want to incentivize. Okay? Make the incentives such that they are not overwhelming. Okay? It does not become the sole purpose of doing the thing. Make the incentives to some degree uncertain. We know from years of psychological research that uncertain incentives work better than certain incentives. Uncertain incentives are like the bonuses that you are excited to get, as opposed to your weekly salary that you kind of expect and are no longer excited about. You can use smart incentives. We should use them. It's part of your toolbox for increasing your motivation.
Right. This, because of course it's the surprise piece that is essential. You're not, if the incentive is a surprise, then you're not engaging in the activity for the reward because you don't actually know that the reward is there to begin with in the first place.
Yes, by the way, even so, that was in the original study, the children's study, when they got the incentive for drawing without knowing about it in advance. It did not decrease their motivation. But there are similar effects that uncertain incentives. I mean, you don't know whether you will get the incentive today, but you know that there is a probability, and these tend to increase motivation.
Mm-hmm. So how about on a related note, just from someone who might be considering a career in something that they're passionate about, what advice would you give to somebody who has made the decision that their passion is art and music, and now they're entering into that career? Are there some ways that they can kind of avoid burnout or avoid that interference? I know I tell some of my students in particular to carve out some time for a passion project, for example, with the hopes that perhaps you don't lose your taste for that activity because you have work for this time, and then you can have that intrinsically motivated activity or the intrinsically motivated version of that activity separate. I'm not sure if there's any evidence of that being effective.
Well, there is no evidence that paying people to do their job decreases their motivation. So there is no worry about that. Okay? Incentives decrease motivation when they change the way you think about what you do. Okay, when you did not expect to get paid, okay, and now you think like, why are you paying me?
Mhm.
Okay, so we talk to each other now. I'm not paying you, and you're not paying me for our conversation. We talk to each other because we think that this is going to be fun and interesting. If I told you, Ryan, I'm going to pay you to interview me, you might think, well, what's wrong with talking to her that like she needs to pay someone to do that? Okay, like
Sure.
you would have to make sense of this bizarre offer. Okay, but when my employer pays for my job, I don't need to make sense of it. It's completely sensible in my mind, and there is no evidence that paying employees decreases the motivation. So I would never worry about that. I would worry about paying or giving penalties, which is the other way, when someone is not sure why they are doing the thing that they are doing. Okay? And let me just explain my comment on penalties.
Sure.
They take basically young people who are underage and consume alcohol. Okay, they might frame it as in their mind as the only reason to avoid consuming alcohol in public is that it's illegal. Okay, that there are penalties for this. Okay, which means that the moment I turn 21, I'm going to spend much more time in a bar and drinking, binge drinking constantly. Okay,
Yeah.
we worry about that. Okay, that this 21-year-old person didn't figure out that the law and the incentives were actually meant to protect their health. And
Yeah.
the reason,
It makes me think of, it makes me worried for parents who sort of will verbalize every activity in the home. So, you need to brush your teeth, you need to do this. And my first thought was, I mean, are we literally teaching them that the motivation has absolutely no benefit for me? It is literally to please our parental masters. Do you think that applies in that case?
Exactly, right? Or you need to finish your dinner in order to get a dessert. That's terrible, right? Because if I'm a child, what am I supposed to learn here? That food is not something that I'm supposed to enjoy unless it's dessert? Okay.
Yeah. So I want to talk about conflicting goals because it seems as like most people don't just have one big goal that they're working on. That most people have all kinds of different motivations at play, constantly interacting with each other. Uh, for example, as a personal example, having started a ketogenic diet at the beginning of this year, I'm constantly sort of torn between staying on track for my diet, which I consider being healthy, but I also value having a really good tasty meal and specifically going off diet on occasion, right? I value both of those things. And oftentimes I have trouble thinking about my behavior. Of course, I'm a classic overthinker, so um, it's probably harder for me than it is for a lot of people. But I think about mixing in cheat days, and sometimes it's should I have a cheat day once a month or do I have it once a week? That can really affect how well I stay on track with my goal. Could you talk about that self-talk and some tips for how we should frame dealing with multiple goals that might conflict with one another?
Ryan, I love this example. It's a great question. I'm not sure I have a great answer because you are talking about several goals that you might have for eating, okay, which is eating what you think is healthy, and then eating what is available, what you might enjoy, okay, what other people might serve you. There are so many goals that are around our food selection. And then you want to find the food and the eating pattern that really satisfies all these goals. Okay, like you want to be able to identify the food that is healthy and that is colorful, okay, and that is fun and tasty, and that other people around you eat, so that you can be part of the party. It's really about identifying these, what we refer to in the motivation literature, multi-final means. Okay, the food that can serve all these goals. Okay, the means that can help you achieve more than one goal. It's not always possible.
Right.
Sometimes you will just have to not eat that food that is on your diet, and then you suggest, well, maybe there are going to be some balancing, such that there are cheat days, there are specific opportunities, there are holidays. The reason I said that the answer might be less than satisfying here is that it's a really fine between balancing and between not really changing yourself. Okay, and so what I mean is that you can think about balancing in terms of, I will skip breakfast by doubling the food that I'm going to eat in lunch, and that might not be ideal for the goal that you're trying to achieve. Like to change your diet to become healthier, you really need to change. You need to follow a different regimen than what you've been doing until now.
And specifically for these kinds of situations where it's a long-term goal that has potential conflicts, like I brought up having an enjoyable meal, but I mean, you also added to that, like there's some social norms that play. Like, I don't want to be difficult at a party, which is something I think about too. For these kinds of goals that are long term, it makes me think a lot about, where does discipline actually fit into this puzzle? Because at the beginning we talked about intrinsic motivation. You have to like what you're doing, and I have crafted my diet to make sure that I enjoy what I eat. But then I start to figure out, like, where does discipline fit in? Because it seems as though I would need to both like it and have discipline in order to stay on track.
Well, you need discipline in order to change what you like and change what you eat. But the change needs to occur while your general life satisfaction from food is not affected at all. Okay, you should keep enjoying your meals, and maybe you should learn to enjoy the meals that you cook for yourself. Okay, or these new foods that you discover. As it turned out, you mentioned before that our preferences often follow our actions. With food, that's huge. Okay, the food that you like is the food that you've been eating. Okay, once you change what you eat, you will also change what you like. But you need to design that change. So you need the self-discipline in order to create change. Any sort of change requires self-discipline, but design the goal such that the idea is to enjoy my new regimen, to enjoy my new foods and my new way of eating, to have just as much pleasure in my life, except I'm going to do it in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, to add to that, like, there is something pleasurable. There is something pleasurable about confidently saying that you're disciplined, right?
Oh, yes.
Which kind of, maybe not everyone views it that way, but over time, it seems as though for activities that aren't inherently desirable, that through repetition, you can start to gain some sort of psychological reward from observing progress. And that is the reward in itself sometimes.
Yeah, and one great example for that is the streaks. Okay, so many of us have these streaks that are really not important. Okay, having a streak on some engagement with a computer game. okay, or the Wordle in the New York Times or whatever, like that is really not an important goal for people, like not an important goal in your life, but yet we enjoy the sense of progress and the sense of the success on the streak, okay, being able to tell each other, I've been doing it now for 50 days, and kind of setting these goals that are not really important by themselves, but allow us to feel that we are moving, okay, we are getting somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Now, to wrap up, we're recording this in December, so we're on the verge of a new year. Now, I know through reading some of your work that you're pro New Year's resolutions, and there are some reasons behind that. Could you talk a little bit about why we should embrace the New Year's resolution as a concept, and then B, perhaps give some final tips for how we might stay motivated for those goals that we're setting?
Okay, so first part, why we should set New Year's resolutions. Well, it's always good to be self-aware. It's always good to know your goals, okay? To maybe draw your goal system so you understand what's important for you in your life. New Year is the best time to do that, okay? It's a reminder that this is something new. It's a start, and take the hour or 5 minutes, I don't know, maybe you're fast, that it takes for you to think about what you want to accomplish this year. Well, it's a really good opportunity, right? Some people do it much more often, okay? Some people ask themselves, what do I want to accomplish this week, okay? Or maybe today. Some people need the New Year's resolution, and no, I always think about what I want to accomplish in my life at the beginning of the year. Now, whether you will stick with your resolution, first, I wouldn't worry about it too much, okay? The idea with setting resolutions is really identifying the direction, okay? It's not about whether you can get there, it's about whether you are going to go there, okay? Whether you know where you want to go. And second, to the extent that you will still be on the path, we know is a function of how intrinsically motivated you are to pursue the resolution. That is how much the way there feels right, okay, as opposed to getting there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I feel lots of motivation from our conversation to tackle some of my long-term goals, and hopefully the listeners feel the same. Thank you so much for being on today, Ayelet Fishbach.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
For more on Ayelet, visit ayeletfishbach.com. That's AYELETFISHBACH.com. Or pick up a copy of Get It Done, Surprising Lessons from the Science of Motivation, wherever books are sold. If you enjoy this podcast, please share an episode with 2 of your friends. Follow the Why Do We Do That Facebook page for updates and additional content. Don't forget to rate and write a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow on Instagram at Why Do We Do That Podcast, or X, formerly known as Twitter, at WDWDTpod. As always, feel free to email me with comments or guest suggestions at whydowedothatpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Dr. Ryan Moyer, hoping you found some answers to the question, why do we do that?